The next and final form in the admission bundle is the diagnosis screen. This is where you can enter all of the diagnoses for this client and select the principal diagnosis. This form will automatically open when completing the admission outpatient bundle, or you can open it directly through the menus or by searching for it. Since this is the admission for this client, I'm going to select admission as the type of diagnosis. You should choose whichever is most appropriate for the situation. The date of the diagnosis will be today. I'm going to click Current to make the time of diagnosis be the current time. This section is where I can enter up to 3 Axis 1 diagnoses. It's important to note here that the principal diagnosis needs to be the Axis 1-1 section for CSI reporting purposes. You can look up the diagnoses by either the DSM code or the description. I'm going to enter my client's principal diagnosis and a secondary diagnosis as well. If there is Axis 2 information available, for example from a referral sheet, you can enter it into the boxes below. Like above, there are 3 sections for the Axis 2 diagnoses. There are a few important things to remember when entering in a diagnosis. First, always enter the principal diagnosis in Axis 1-1. If no primary diagnosis is available, put in 799.9 or diagnosis deferred. If you do this, keep in mind that you are required to enter an updated diagnosis after 30 days, or you will be out of compliance. Be aware that using the 799.9 code can have serious billing consequences if used incorrectly. Talk to your supervisor before ever using this code to make sure that it applies. Second, always enter something in the Axis 2-1 section. If there is no Axis 2 diagnosis, don't just leave it blank. Enter V71.09 for no diagnosis on Axis 2. If you are doing this, make sure to use a capital V or you will not find this code. The reason you need to put in this code when there is no diagnosis is for CSI reporting purposes. Some other things to keep in mind when entering a diagnosis are the requirements for medical necessity. There are some Axis 1 disorders that are not covered under medical necessity, but can be entered in on this screen. These include autism disorders and antisocial disorders. Keep these and other requirements for medical necessity in mind when entering your principal diagnosis. The criteria for medical necessity can be found in the SFDPH Provider Manual on the website. This box indicates trauma. Below is an area for the General Medical Condition Summary code for the client. Below that is a box for substance abuse and dependence, and an area for that diagnosis, if available. Notice that only Axis 1 is a required field on this screen, so if you don't have this information, Avatar will not require you to enter anything. However, your agency may have different policies regarding these fields, so check with your supervisor if you have any questions. The principal diagnosis is a required field. This drop-down menu should list all of the diagnoses you have entered for this client. Remember, your principal diagnosis should be in the Axis 1-1 box. I'll pick my principal diagnosis here. Scrolling down, you can see sections for the Axis 4 information, if you have that, as well as the GAF score, if your agency uses that metric. The only required field here is the diagnosing practitioner, but check with your supervisor for your agency's specific policies. The diagnosing practitioner is the staff member who has given this client their diagnosis. Keep in mind that only staff members who are qualified to diagnose are allowed to be in this field. Below this is a space for diagnosis or rule out comments, as well as any Axis 3 diagnoses. If, for whatever reason, you need more than 3 diagnoses for each axis, space for that is provided in the sections marked Supplemental Diagnosis. When you are finished entering in diagnosis information, click Submit and this will be saved. It then asks you if you want to return to the pre-display. I'm going to click Yes and show you some extra features of the diagnosis form. A unique feature of the diagnosis section, and something that sets it apart from other forms, is the ability to create, edit, or delete diagnoses at any time. If I wanted to go back to change something about a previously entered diagnosis, I could select it from this menu, click Edit, and easily change everything about this diagnosis except for the date. If you did make a mistake on the date of diagnosis, you can delete it from the pre-display. To do this, all you need to do is select the diagnosis to delete, then click Delete. Once I've deleted the diagnosis, I would need to go back into the diagnosis form and click Add to re-enter the diagnosis on the correct date. This is how you enter a diagnosis into Avatar, and edit or delete a previously entered diagnosis. This is also the last form in the Admission Outpatient bundle.